The danger of misplaced compassion, Mishpatim 57:81. We all know the Torah is a compassionate document. The mitzvah which appears most in the Torah is the mitzvah of caring for the poor, the elderly, the stranger, the weakest in society. The Parsha even opens by commanding us to have compassion for the Eved Ivri, the lowest in society, the slave, the Hebrew slave. But it's not all touchy-feely. V'chi yazid ish al riehu lahargo va'armo me'i mizbechi tikachenu lamut. And if a man comes to scheme upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, you shall take him from my altar, that you shall take him to die. In other words, the murderer cannot claim divine refuge at God's altar. The altar will not provide him sanctuary or immunity. God will not play that game. Let me give you a case in point from Sefer Malachim, the book of Kings. Yoav, David's general, claimed refuge at God's altar. Nevertheless, he was put to death at the altar because, as Sefer Malachim tells us, he had blood on his hands. He was chayav, he was guilty, and the sentence had to be meted out regardless of the fact he stood at God's altar. Based on the phrase V'chi yazid ish, and if a man comes to scheme, the Talmud in Sanhedrin teaches us that we're talking about a situation where the man has not yet committed the murder. He's planning to commit the murder, and two witnesses come and issue a hatara, which is a warning. They say to him, if you commit the murder, you are liable for the death penalty. Nevertheless, right in front of the witnesses, he commits the crime and he kills an innocent person. So not only are we talking about a case of premeditated murder, the murderer was actually warned not to commit the crime and he still did it anyway. What is the Torah telling us? Despite the fact we have to be compassionate, we also need to have rules, and in order for society to function, those rules need to be enforced, or else society, the rule of law, simply breaks down and society will no longer function. The Midrash Tanchuma puts it this way: one who becomes compassionate to the cruel will ultimately become cruel to the compassionate. As it's written, Shaul, Saul, and the nation spared Agag, the wicked Amalekite king. Who was Agag's descendant? Haman, who attempted to wipe out Shaul's descendants. Moreh Nevuchim, the Guide to the Perplexed, written by the Rambam, puts it this way: the wicked and calculating person who killed intentionally and was sentenced to death, if he seeks sanctuary among us, we must not provide him with asylum and not have mercy upon him, because compassion towards the wicked is cruelty to all beings. Think about the judge who keeps letting the drunk driver off with a slap on the wrist. Yes, he's being compassionate to the drunk driver, but he's being cruel to the person the drunk driver is going to hurt next time he gets on the road. It'd be nice if our leaders understood the dangers of misplaced compassion, that it will come back to bite us. The Republicans failed to hold Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene accountable for outrageous statements. First of all, she's a backer of the QAnon cult. She also claims that a laser backed by the Rothschilds created wildfires on the West Coast, clearly an anti-Semitic claim. She claims the Mossad was involved in the Kennedy assassination and has denied the reality of mass school shootings and the 9/11 attacks. Talk about rubbing salt in the wounds. These poor people who survived these attacks or lost loved ones during these attacks. On top of it, they have to hear a congresswoman spouting these wacko theories. The congresswoman also has supported violence against members of the opposing party. Because Republicans failed to hold her accountable for her outrageous statements, the Democratic majority has banned her from holding committee positions. But now she's running around presenting herself as a martyr. She wears a mask which reads censored and is claiming to be a victim of partisan vitriol. She's become emboldened by her party's failure to deal with her. And frankly, the Republicans should have learned from the Democrats not to make this mistake. Is anyone really surprised that Congresswoman Tlaib is spreading a blood libel against Israel, falsely accusing Israel of deliberately spreading the coronavirus and withholding the vaccine from Palestinians? Nobody should be surprised because she's never been held accountable for these type of anti-Semitic statements before. Her fellow squad member, Congresswoman Omar, never was censured for her infamous anti-Semitic comment, "It's all about the Benjamins," nor removed from committee assignments because of that comment. Instead, her caucus put forth a hodgepodge resolution declaring opposition to all forms of hate. And despite their track record of anti-Semitism, Tlaib and Omar were endorsed by their party's leadership when they faced primary races and even financially supported. The reality of the situation is both parties actually know how to hold people who misbehave accountable. The Democrats forced Senator Franken to resign because of sexual harassment. Now, some say they actually dealt with him too harshly, and that can be debated, but they dealt with the issue. The Republicans stripped Congressman Steve King of committee assignments because of his support of white nationalism. But the inability to confront the Greenes, the Tlaibs, and the Omars of the world will only embolden them. We should be wise to remember the Torah's warning. Evil must be confronted. If you kick the can down the road, you're doing it at your own peril and the peril of the innocent.